For anyone who hasn't been formally introduced, I'd like to present to you my masterpiece, the absolute powerhouse, affectionately named by my Twitch chat as Mrs. BINKY BONK. This is the most powerful build I have ever seen in this game. It is insanely simple and easy to replicate, with almost every single element of the build available to you very near the start of the game. And in this video, I'm going to teach you exactly how to create it for yourself and destroy Elden Ring as the legendary Mrs. BINKY BONK. As you've already seen during this short intro, she can absolutely wreck any enemy in the game, staggering most enemies in 2 hits and delivering thousands upon thousands of damage with ease. All footage has been recorded on New Game Plus, so enemies are far tougher than usual, yet she is still breezing through the likes of Malekith and even the Elden Beast completely solo. I won't keep you waiting any longer, let's get into the build and see how you can do this for yourself. The primary aspect of this build is of course dual-wielding 2 great stars. Power stancing these devastatingly powerful great hammers is all you need to absolutely rule this game. And as of a few patches ago, you can get 2 copies of this in just 1 playthrough, both of them very early on. I'm going to talk you through the quickest and most efficient way to get them, but you can skip the next minute or so if you already know how to acquire both copies of the Great Stars. Firstly, you need to make your way to the Altus Plateau. The quickest and easiest way to do this is grab both halves of the Dectus Lift Medallion from Fort Height and Fort Faroth respectively, head up the lift, and now you can simply just run into the Altus Plateau. Now you want to loot the caravan in the northwest, and this will contain your first copy of the Great Stars. The second copy is very close by, but there are a few additional steps you need to do first. To acquire the second copy, you need to defeat Magnus the Beastclaw, who can be invaded at the Writhe-Blood Ruins very near the caravan where you got the first copy. To invade him, you need to have progressed White Mask Varry's questline to the point where he asks you to invade players. To do this is very simple, just defeat one main boss and then go back and speak to Varry at the first sight of grace. Then he will move to the Rose Church in Liurnia, and at this point you will unlock the ability to invade Magnus the Beastclaw. Now this didn't used to be possible, you used to have to invade actual players to progress Varry's questline, but FromSoft, very kindly thinking of people that don't have internet access, added Magnus to the game and made this build possible.
Oh God. I am no man.
Now, with both copies of the Great Stars in hand, it's time to start looking at how we can effectively utilize this build. So firstly, let me talk about a few of the reasons why these weapons are so amazing. And the list really is endless, so I'll do my best to keep it short and sweet. Firstly, their primary damage type is Strike, which means they will absolutely rinse through any enemies that most weapons will just bounce off of. Any of the stone miners, the stone golems, and especially the Crystallians are going to be absolutely crushed by the Great Stars, because as you see here with the power stance jumping attacks, they deal insane damage even when the Crystallians still have their hyper armor on. On top of the fact that they're probably the most powerful strike weapons in the game, they also deal inherent blood loss buildup, which means they synergize very well with a few different builds that we'll talk about later on in the video. And finally, they're one of the few ways in the game that you can restore your health just by attacking. Every single attack that connects with an enemy will restore 1% of your health per swing per weapon. So when power stancing them and spamming that L1 button, you will keep restoring health and just tanking through enemies' hits. Even if the hits are blocked, you still heal. For all of these reasons, the Great Stars is hands down one of the best weapons in the game. Another one of the many amazing things about this build is the fact that the stat points that you want are so incredibly simple. The first thing you obviously want to do is make sure you meet both requirements of 22 strength and 12 dex, because you'll be power stancing them, so you'll need to meet the full strength requirement. After this, you want to be putting all of your points into vigor, endurance, and strength. My character is insanely leveled up right now, having just melted every single boss in the game for the purposes of this video. But even at level 100 or even lower, you can still very effectively pull off this build. You want to get yourself up to 60 strength as quick as possible, because that is the soft cap. Then you want to make sure you have a nice amount of points in vigor so that you have plenty of health, and a decent amount in endurance as well, because these are very heavy weapons and you want to make sure you've got at least a half decent armor set on. By no means do you need to get your strength to 99, but I had nothing else to do with my stat points, so I thought, fuck it, why not? Next up, you want to make sure you're getting the absolute most attack rating out of these weapons, so let's take a look at how to do that. By default, the Great Stars scales with both strength and dex quite evenly, and neither of these stats scale particularly well. Therefore, you want to make sure you give the Great Stars the heavy infusion. Certain Ashes of War will allow this by default, but ideally you want to grab the Iron Wet Blade in Stormveil Castle, as that will add the heavy affinity to the menu when selecting compatible Ashes of War. You will need a Stone Sword key to get into the room where you loot the Iron Wet Blade, and showing you it on the map for reference, that room is located just here in Stormveil Castle. Now that you've got that, if you really want to absolutely min-max this build, there are certain Ashes of War that are going to be better than others. But as you'll see throughout the whole of the footage in this video, I do not use an Ash of War once. This is all based around jumping attacks. So literally, just grab any 2 Ashes of War that are compatible with the heavy affinity, and you are set. But if you did want one particular recommendation, I would advise Crackblade on at least one of them, because using that will make the Great Hammers deal even more poise damage. Next up, let's take a look at the talismans that you should use, and then we'll go into detail with how to effectively utilize this build and put it all together. There's a wide range of talisman options available to you with this build, but here are my 4 favorites. The Erdtree's Favor +2 is hands down my favorite talisman in the game because it's so versatile and helps with so many different builds. Early game, you could easily replace this with something like Radagon's Source Seal or any of the Arsenal charms. You basically just want a talisman to help increase your equip load so that you can wear a heavy, tanky armor set. Next up, we've got the Lord of Blood's Exaltation. This is going to be amazing because the Great Stars inflict blood loss so often, especially if you're using the Blood Grease, meaning they're going to deal even more damage. Next up, and the most important one in this build, also found in Stormveil, is the Claw Talisman. Pretty much every single time you attack, you are gonna want to make sure it's a jump attack, and this is gonna make jump attacks even more powerful. And on the note of jump attacks, if you want to min-max your damage even further, you could even wear the Raptor's Black Feathers chest piece found inside the Sage's Cave, which will strengthen your jump attacks even more, because this does stack with the Claw Talisman. And finally, as always with my builds, you've got the Situational Talisman. I usually keep on the Dragon Crash Shield +2, but you can swap this out for whatever boss or enemies you're facing at the time, such as the Haligtree if you're facing Radabeast. Now let's talk about how to really effectively put this build together as we look at more options for armor and mixed physick. As you will have witnessed many times over throughout this video, this build is so insanely strong, it basically plays the game for you. There is very few strats involved other than the occasional roll and many jump attacks. There are certain items and enhancements you can apply to this that will make it even more devastating, such as Blood Grease as previously mentioned, and Exalted Flesh. If you really wanted to, you could even wield a dagger as one of your secondary weapons and apply Golden Vow to it so that you're dealing even more damage. But as you've seen from all of this insane footage, none of that is needed to make this build absolutely devastating in all situations. So as we're destroying yet another boss, let's take a look at some of the physics that you could use. My absolute personal favorite and the one I recommend you never take off is the Stone Barb Cracked Tier. That is going to make enemies' stances break even easier, and you will be staggering enemies almost in one hit. The second one is very interchangeable, and at low levels I actually really advise the Strength Knot tier, because that will give you an artificial +10 strength for 3 minutes, which is going to make you deal insane amounts of damage even at very low levels. A few other great options though are any defensive one, such as both of the Opaline tiers, and that is what I'm wielding at the moment. And then finally, in regards to armor, you really just want to wear the heaviest armor that you can that will still keep you in that medium equip load. A great choice, because it's very easily accessible, is Radagon's set, but if your current equip load can't handle that, honestly any armor set will do. Enemies will very rarely get a chance to attack you, so your armor doesn't matter that much. It's probably the least important part of this build. And that pretty much rounds it up. Please, if you have any questions or anything you think I haven't covered about this build, ask me in the comments. It is my brainchild and my baby. I truly love this build, so I know everything about it, and if I have accidentally left something out, I'm more than happy to answer it in the comments. And just quickly as we're wrapping up, if anyone's interested, how I stumbled across this build is actually a member of my audience challenged me to do a hammer only run. I found this beauty and was immediately in love with it. Anyway, with that, you now have all the tools needed in your arsenal to binky bonk your way through the lands between, and I hope you have as much fun doing it as I did. And as always, my friends, all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.